Welcome, everybody. We're doing another episode of Indie Reads Aloud. My name is Diana Catherine Penn, and I'm your host. And today we are bringing back another repeat reader for you guys. This is Evelyn Puerto, and she is going to read from her second book in the Royal Mages series. It's a story called The Girl Who Wrote on Water. Welcome back, Evelyn.
Well, thank you so much, Diana. I'm thrilled to be here again.
I love it when people come back and read to me again because I've already seen a little taste of your work and now I get more of it. So I'm super excited. Just for those people who have not tuned into the first episode you appeared on, can you give us a little bit of your background in your writing journey?
Oh, wow. Well, I was one of those people who never expected to be a writer. I actually hated it in school and even won a writing contest or two and said, nope, I'm going into healthcare. Well, we'll flash forward many years and I was, I don't know what to say. My arm was twisted into writing the memoir of this Ukrainian family who had suffered a
Okay.
lot of persecution. And I wrote that book and then decided I love this. I love this process of putting together a story. But writing memoir is tough because you have to stick to the facts. So I'm
Sure.
doing fantasy and making up my own rules and my own world and my own
You
story.
can't get too further. I mean, these two genres are so diametrically opposed, right? One
Right.
is one is very specific and very real, and the other is so far left of that. You can't, I mean,
That's
I
right.
don't know anybody who puts anything real in fantasy books.
So, yeah. So there we are. So here I am. And
And this
I
is
have,
book two in your series, right?
this is book two in that series. I have a series of four that I wrote previously. And book three is out. And this fall in September, I plan to release the fourth and final book of the Royal Mages series.
That's so exciting. I'm so happy for you.
I am so excited.
So
Sad
what
to
what
sad to be
comes
finishing
next?
that. Oh, what
What
comes next?
what comes next though?
Well, I am writing a novella. It kind of follows on one of the side characters from the Royal Mages series. It's kind of a
Okay.
cozy fantasy mashup murder mystery. And
Fun.
I'm just doing that just to give my mind a little rest. And I'm in the process of plotting out an entirely new epic fantasy series. So
Fantastic.
I'm not quite ready to start writing that one, so I'm letting the novella fill in the gaps right now.
Sometimes we need a palate cleanser in between major
Mhm.
projects.
Yep, yep.
And I'm so glad to hear you say the word plot. Makes me very happy. As a passionate plotter, I love it when I discover
Mhm.
authors who also plot. So,
Yes.
welcome
I
to the dark side.
thank you. I cannot write unless I know where I'm going.
Yeah.
Sometimes it changes, but I have to have a goal.
You have to have a starting point so you know
Mhm.
beginning, middle, and end. And then if it moves around, so be it. It's like a
Yeah,
chessboard at that
yeah.
point, right? But at least, as with chess, you have to know how the pieces move to begin with before you can play
That's
that
exactly
game,
right.
you know?
Exactly.
So give us the overview of this series. What is the um overarch story umbrella of the series?
Of the Royal Mages, well, the first book starts with Princess Eliana. And she is told on her 18th birthday that she and only she can go to the underground creepy world to break the curse on a prince. An evil sorcerer cursed him 100 years ago, and he's been in this sleep. And if she doesn't break the curse, the evil sorcerer will be able to take over the continent and enslave them all. Well, at first she refuses and says, I'm not doing it, but they talk her into it. And she thinks, well, okay, I'll go there, I'll wake up this dude, and then I'm out of there. She breaks the curse and finds out breaking the curse is just the beginning.
Okay.
Meanwhile, her friend Princess Derya is on her way back to her homeland where her father is the emperor, and she wants to warn him that the evil sorcerer is now making his moves. But just as she reaches the mountainous border of the country, a huge cataclysm erupts and destroys all of Eliana's kingdom. So Daria thinks, oh no, Eliana failed to wake up the prince, and her realm is destroyed. And now I've really got to get going. But she's in the mountains and they are faced with avalanches and all kinds of trials, and they're not sure they're ever going to get home.
I am so excited to hear you read part of this. I love fantasy because it is a tremendous escape from real life,
Hmm.
and we get to
Hmm.
just sink in and get cozy with Coco and lose ourselves.
Right.
So I'm super excited. So,
Great.
Evelyn Puerto, when you are ready, please take the microphone and read aloud from The Girl Who Wrote on Water.
Water. So, since this is the second book in the series, I'm not starting with the first chapter. I'm starting with chapter 3. Derya and her friends have escaped the mountains and are now approaching the country of Nafplio. Nafplio's capital, Derya noted with relief, was still standing, untouched by the cataclysm. They'd traveled 6 days since the last avalanche and had thankfully endured nothing more than a few tremors. The first 3 days had been the worst. 3 long days on foot of nerve-wracking work, picking away along a narrow, rocky trail where one slip could mean a fall to death on the jagged slope below. 3 days of leading jittery horses who whinnied and shied at every tumble of a pebble, traversing narrow paths along sheer cliffs dusted with snow and black smears of ice. The huskiest men who were carrying the wounded who couldn't walk were barely able to balance on the treacherous slopes. Daria's palms dampened at the memory of a horse that slid over a precipice and fell shrieking to its death. It could have so easily been one of them. Once on the tumbled plains, the going was easier. While no hint of spring relieved the gray and brown of the rocks, only traces of snow remained. So Nafleo's midwinter is much like ours. The shortest days have long passed, but the cold remains, at least 6 more weeks till spring. And now they approached Nafleo's capital, Ziamet. Its spires and domed turrets shone under the winter sun, looking like silver swords threatening the wispy clouds that scudded overhead. It didn't appear to be a welcoming city, not in Daria's mind. At least the icy blasts of the wind were tempered here, still cold, but not the chill that had oozed into her bones while she passed through the heights, like frosty worms that drank her strength. What made her stomach twist were the hostile glares of the Nafplians. While the 3 days of travel through the rolling hills of Nafplio were easier than the trek through the mountains, Daria was more unsettled than when she'd traversed the pile of rubble left by the avalanche. The closer they got to the capital, the darker the scowls became, and the higher the prices the locals demanded for food. None of the inns had rooms, none of the stables had spare stalls. The last town wouldn't allow any of them within its walls. Even Kellebick's smoothest diplomacy couldn't convince them to unlock their iron gates. So much for a people who claimed to be hospitable. Were the people unsettled by the cataclysm? She couldn't blame them. Although she'd spotted only a few collapsed bridges and barns, surely the Nafplians knew what had happened to Ymittos. Anyone who ventured up the mountain slopes and looked west would have seen all that remained of it, nothing but white, shimmering sand. And word of such a calamity would have spread faster than a hurricane's wind. Rumors had surely reached her father, the Emperor of Cinar. Once in Ziamet, her first duty would be to send him a message by bird, telling him of Eliana's failed attempt to break Cetus's curse and how it likely caused the cataclysm. And she needed to impress on her father the looming threat of invasion, by Cetus, whose ambition to dominate and enslave the world hadn't ebbed over the centuries. If Cinar didn't mobilize, they'd be overrun by Cetus's monsters, like grains of sand drowned by the oncoming tide. Daria's heart sank as if pulled under the deadly sands, sinking down to the underworld. What had happened when Eliana, Princess of Ymittos and Istvan of Nafplio, went to Moch to break the curse? She sighed. Oh, Eliana, did the half-goat, half-fish Mochians or a monster kill you? Or was it the cataclysm? Was your death quick? Derya scowled. Did Istvan help or hinder you? She couldn't exactly say why. She only knew Istvan couldn't be trusted, and wondered, for the hundredth time, what had happened to Eliana during the cataclysm. Thinking of Istvan brought to mind someone else she had reason to distrust. She nudged her mare to speed up so she could ride alongside Chiliarch Bahadir. Chiliarch, I'm puzzled about something. He snorted. The Naflians? They puzzle everyone. She smiled and shook her head. Not them this time. Remember when we were separated by the avalanche? You were shouting and Kelbeck was writing down what you said? Bahadir nodded. What did you say was our best plan of action? Didn't Kellebeck write it out for you? Please just answer. I advised you to send scouts to find an alternate route and to ask the stone mages if they could shift the rock to create a path. Why do you ask? Her elation at having been proved right was tempered by the sour confirmation that she couldn't trust Kellebec. He had clearly been second-guessing her orders, overruling them because he was sure he knew best. Derya was still forming a reply to Bahadur's question when they rounded a bend. The dirt road turned to stone pavers, announcing they had begun their final approach to the stone-walled capital. Instead of the dull thud of hooves on packed dirt, the horseshoes clattered against the stone. With interest, Derya studied the city. Not surprisingly, it was much smaller than her home city of Tolgatalp, capital of the Empire of Cinar. She'd frowned, trying to remember a long-ago lesson. Maybe 5,000 people lived here, she guessed, or 6. Square walls joined by round turrets were relieved only by slits for archers and holes through which to pour boiling oil. Archers grasping bows with nocked arrows lined the parapet. Had Naflio declared war on Cinar? She took a deep breath and rode through the Iron City gates, following her pennant bearers, the black and turquoise flags flapping in the wind. Bahadur rode in front of her, flanked by guards. More guards rode on either side of her, and Kellebec and Sophia rode behind. Her heart raced and her hands trembled. This wasn't the welcome she'd been expecting. Bahadur had been right to be cautious. There were signs of unrest everywhere. Trash was piled high along the streets. One heap looked like a pair of corpses flung down like broken dolls. Shops were shuttered, and the streets were as deserted as if it were midnight, rather than a few hours before noon. The few people who'd ventured out stopped and glared, muttering to Derya what sounded like curses. She'd never felt so unwelcome in her life. A new experience for the heir of Cinar, she thought. Not everyone will be your ally, or pretend to be. They proceeded to the Diadachi's palace, passing arched colonnades which should be filled with market vendors, but now stood empty and silent. Farther in, she rode past larger homes, their gates bolted and windows shuttered. Fear seemed to have gripped the throat of the community and refused to let go. Her pennant bearers wove their way through the winding streets toward the palace. As long as the Diadachi gave them shelter for a night or two, all would be well. Then they could finally start the return journey homeward to Cinar. After 6 months of travel, she longed for the familiar comforts of her own rooms and to be free of her diplomatic duties. They turned a corner and reached the gates of the castle. An iron portcullis blocked the entrance, and a row of 5 armed guards stood behind it. Derya's herald strode up to them. The heir of Cinar has come to visit the Diadochi of Nafplio. A guard with a thick black mustache, which crawled over the edge of his upper lip, spoke. Who did you say? The heir of Cinar. The man stared at the herald, the pennant bearers, the guards. His swarthy face was impassive and his brown eyes narrowed. I don't see her. Derya leaned forward, peering over her mare's twitching ears. Are you looking for me? The man frowned. How can I be sure you aren't an impostor? We had your arrival. Perhaps we should have sent a message. Too late now. But the hostility of the Naf is his As he scanned the missive, his eyes darted back and forth, moving quicker than Derya's galloping heart. His suspicion sent prickles down her spine. The Emperor's seal should have been enough. The guard frowned. I'll send word. He shoved the letter into the hands of the guard next to him. Go quickly. The second guard took the document and ran toward the castle. Nearly a quarter of an hour passed before the panting guard raced back. Let them in, just the leaders and 10 of their men. The mustachioed guard scowled. Fine, raised the portcullis. After the creaking stopped, Derya motioned for her herald and pennant bearers to advance inside. She gave Bahadur what she intended to be a reassuring smile and followed the advance guard into the courtyard. This could be a trap, Bahadur said. Or an opportunity, Derya answered. Once they had entered, the gatekeeper lowered the portcullis. Derya guided her mare across the cobblestone courtyard and stopped her mount in front of the castle's massive doors. She dismounted and stood next to Bahadur, taking some reassurance from his commanding presence and long sword. By this time, a woman and 2 men had left the castle and stood in a row at the top of the steps that led down to the courtyard. They wore the usual clothing of Nafplio, long white tunics with elaborate embroidery over colored leggings or trousers. Even their heavy cloaks didn't conceal the fact that their garments were rumpled and their owners disheveled, as if they hadn't bothered to attend to their hair or clothing. A few days' growth of beard darkened the lower portion of the men's faces, and they both bore sheathed swords at their hips. Who were they? Derya whispered to Bahadir. Kelebek sidled over to Derya. The woman and one of the men are niece and nephew of the Diadochi. I don't recognize the other. She nodded her thanks. Their names? He murmured them in her ear. She studied the group, starting with the unknown man, whose black hair was streaked with white. The woman had the dark olive skin of most Nafplians, as did both the men. The trio descended the steps with heads up and a firm tread. The three stopped a few feet from Derya. The woman in the center held the scroll from the Emperor in her hands. Judging from her poised bearing and tiny lines around her eyes, Derya guessed she was about 35. The woman asked coldly, You are the heir of Cinar? Derya nodded, giving her the Cenarian salute, clenched fist with the first two fingers outstretched, pressed against her heart. Lady Aspasia, I bring you greetings from the Emperor of Cinar. He had hoped I would find you and your family well. Lady Aspasia gasped, and the man to her left blanched. The one on the right scowled. Is this a joke? He said. Daria cast a puzzled glance at Kellebec, who gave her only the smallest twitch of an eyebrow to indicate his own confusion. She spread her hands out in what she hoped the Nafplians would take as a conciliatory gesture. I beg your pardon if I have offended, but I don't understand how. Don't tell us you haven't heard. The man on the left, the one Kellebec had said was named Calix, crossed his arms. He was much younger than Aspasia, his olive skin smooth and unwrinkled. Heard what? Daria asked. In the 3 days we've been traveling across Nafplia, no one has spoken to us except to overcharge us for food and drink. Can you blame them? Calix spit out, his deep voice dripping with bitterness. Please, Daria said. Blame them for what? Given our circumstance, it's only natural that our people would assume Sinar would invade. Calix twisted his lip. If you are the beginning of an invasion, know that you will be opposed by every man, woman, and child. We will burn our homes and slaughter our goats before we surrender to you. We aren't invading, I assure you, Daria said. And what circumstances? Lady Aspasia studied her face. Perhaps you don't know. The entire ruling family, the Diadochi, his 3 sons, and their children, were all murdered not long ago. An iron hand gripped Daria's heart. What? All of them, the older man said, his voice shaking. Their throats were cut in the middle of the night.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's an interesting place to stop.
The end of the chapter.
Definitely does make me want to know what happens in chapter 4.
There you have it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for your reading. I
Oh,
appreciate
you're
that.
welcome. You're
I have
welcome.
a curious question, and I ask this of many of the fantasy authors I get to speak with. How do you come up with names? They're always so different and so unique. Do you like pull out your Scrabble board and mix up letters? How do you do that?
I have 2 methods. One of them, well, I start with the culture that I'm loosely basing things on. So Nafplio is loosely from the Caucasus region,
Okay.
Armenia, Ossetia. So then I look at a map and look at names of towns, and sometimes those words with a little tweaking of letters might form a nice name. I also look at names from that culture, and sometimes I change them up a little bit, and sometimes I use them as is. But that's generally what I do to get.
So it's just boring research.
Yes, I'm sorry to say, but it's fascinating looking at the map. Oh, I wonder if that town or maybe this town. Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah,
I think it's fun.
absolutely. Especially if it's a region that you've never been to before. It's kind of like travel.
It's exactly right. Or a river. A river's name could be a good name for somebody.
Yeah. Okay, now you've just got my brain spinning. Because
Well, that's good.
I'm in the process of writing a science fiction novel, and I always have a hard time coming up with names that sound futuristic. So
Oh,
that's what I'll have to look at.
yeah,
Um,
maps.
so the other question I had for you is how different are you finding it switching from writing a novella to plotting a series? We talked in the beginning about it being a
Mm.
palate cleanser, but how do you find the mechanics of switching modalities like that?
It's interesting I just, I just heard a podcast on this and it's like, yes, that's my process. They're explaining it. It's crop rotation. And this comes from Brandon Sanderson. So the writing is like growing your wheat, and then you switch to editing, and that's something else, and your planning is something else.
It's
And
fascinating.
so by switching, you're refreshing that part of your mind that does the creative heavy lifting. And when you then switch to editing, then you're using a different part of your brain and it's resting the first, and you keep going around. So the novella, I drafted it. I always write my drafts as fast as I can. So that part is done. So now I'm in editing mode for that and um, plotting mode for the other one. So that's using different parts of my
But
mind.
yeah, I do that as well as I go through
Hmm.
different stages of plotting, drafting, editing, promoting, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, but more the question is, this is a standalone, right?
Well, it's kind of like a tag along. It happens a
Okay.
year after the Royal Mages series ends.
So
One of the
do you get the feeling that you need to continue it, or does it
um
feel like it's a finished? I mean, do you see other companion novellas eventually coming in, or is this going to be a one and done?
yes and no.
Okay.
I it depends on how well it goes over. I I could I'm using one of the kind of the major side characters as the main character in this. So depending on how it goes over, I could have her continue on, or I might just say, no, we're done with her and we're moving on to the next series. It
Okay.
really depends on what my readers say. I mean, if there's great acclaim for more from that kind of thing, or if they want more novellas, more of these companion novellas, then I will do that as well.
Are you finding yourself forcing yourself to be a little bit more abbreviated than you normally would be because it's a novella?
What I had to do was can't have subplots. You just got to stick to the main story. So that helps a lot in reducing the length and also having limited character number of characters.
Okay. Very cool. Very cool. I'm doing the reverse.
Oh,
I'm working on a book that started as a standalone novel and is now evolved into a four-book series. So I'm
oh,
I'm having to approach as a usual standalone author. I'm
hmm.
now having to approach, well, how do I attack a multi-book series, which I've
Right,
never done before. So
right.
I'm kind of doing what you're doing in reverse. It's like the
Yeah.
mirror of it. So
Hmm.
most fascinated to hear how
Hmm.
writers approach craft and from
Right.
what angle. So
Yeah. Yeah. There's a multitude of ways.
absolutely. And that's what I love about this. It's because none of it is ever right or wrong. It just is.
Yeah, that's right. And you can keep experimenting with different ways and mash them up in different ways and see what you get.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
It
I'm so
really
glad you
is.
came back on the program,
Well, thank
Evelyn.
you so
Um,
much for having me. This
And
is
I
always
hope
a
you'll come
pleasure.
back when the next book comes out.
Well, I do plan to come back for book three.
Great.
I cannot read book four because the first chapter is a huge spoiler for the end of book three, and I cannot do
Well,
that.
you can always jump in the middle.
I could jump in the middle, that's true.
You could do
I'll have
that.
to think about that. I'll have to think on it.
I'm open to anything.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you so much for your time today. I
Thanks
really
again,
appreciate it.
Diana.
All right.
Okay.